if you're not generating enough gross to take care of those fixed expenses, what end up happening, Tom? You'll go bankrupt. Now, one of the ways that I talked with Bill about it, and I kept saying, man, I need to be a better operator. I need to do a better job saving money. And he said, Helmy, you are at 40+% net to gross, 15% return on investment. Go away. Get away from me. You need to keep doing what you're doing. Keep in mind that we were doing a really horrible job in some areas, but we generated so much gross that we covered all these fixed expenses, and on top of that, what happened? We covered a lot of other stuff with it.
Exactly.
And Bill told me something, and I told that to all my guys. I said, the statement is okay, but we're going to outgross that statement. We're going to go after it, but then we're going to also pay attention to the details, and those are the details that could take you from 25% net to gross to 35% and plus.
He used to wear me out at these meetings because they got to where they were generating a lot of gross, and gross in production overcomes a lot of problems, right?
Yes, it does.
But he would start wearing him. He says, Bill, we got to start getting on these expenses. We got to get on these expenses. We got to start looking at these expenses. I got to save more. Got to find ways to make more money. And I said, Helmy, you got to get your F&I department up and running. He said, what's the matter? I said, you've got $1 million sitting there in your F&I department. And he looked at it and he says, you know, I hadn't noticed that. I've been so concentrating on new and used vehicle sales and advertising, tracking leads and all that, that I hadn't noticed that about F&I. And I said, that's another $1 million opportunity for you in your store if you just got to the group average, if I recall right.
Correct.
But see, that's why it's so easy as a manager and as a dealer that you get focused in or concentrating in on something and you can't see the forest for the trees. It's not being critical of Helmy at all. We all have this issue. That some things are important to you and other things aren't as much. That's why you just got to keep your eye on the ball. And that's why being a good manager and being a good dealer is difficult.
Right.
Because you have so many balls you've got to keep in the air all the time. And it's very easy for something to get out of the way.
And in that case, I imagine the advice was pretty easy to give because it's a whole lot easier to go generate $1 million in F&I income by making some small changes to every deal that you do versus trying to cut $1 million in expenses out of the store. That is not easy to cut $1 million in expenses. So if you had to choose between the two, obviously get your grosses where they ought to be first, but do it within reason of you cannot increase your gross $100,000 a month and increase your expenses $110,000. It doesn't work. You're just going broke faster. Okay? So it has to be, things have to be in line. The fixed expenses that Bill and Helmy are talking about are the things that, whether sales are good or things are bad, you're stuck with them. Okay? So if you ramp up rent, you go out and you build a brand new facility, you jack the rent from $10,000 a month to $50,000 a month, you're stuck with a $50,000 a month rent factor, whether sales are good or bad.
Let me give you all an example. Let's say that you're a dealership that's generating 1% return on sales, or 1% profit, basically. And you want to hire a manager and you want to pay him a salary of $6,000 a month. Okay? How much money do you have to generate in sales to cover that $6,000?
Go ahead and we need to answer that question a couple of. This is the interactive part, guys. If you're going to learn this, you really need to start putting some words behind those questions. What do you think?
$18,000.
$18,000. Can you put that number on the side, please? How about you, buddy?
Now, this is $6,000 of net profit, right, Bill?
Say, 24 grand.
Right. Well, that's what
20. We got 18,000. We got 24 grand. And what Greg just said, he said that there is $6,000 that is net going off the statement.
This
if
is
you
profit.
have to pay one of your managers, it's off your profit.
Profit.
Goodbye. Dead solid
Right.
expense. Correct?
Yep. Actually, I'll make it easy for you here, guys. The sales that you would have to generate to cover that $6,000 salary are $600,000 in sales. Huh?
That's a lot of sales.
Now, that's under 1%. Now, if the dealer's making 2%, this now becomes $300,000. So now this is why this is so important that you have a great relationship between gross generation and expense control. See what just happened? I just cut the cost of this manager in half.
I'm going to put this a different way.
What would happen if I took this stuff to 4%
Cut it again.
return on sales?
Another way to look at this, with a 2% net to sales, if you cut out $1 in expenses, it's the same as doing $50 more in sales.
Now we're talking sales and not growth.
Sales.
Explain that difference, please.
Sales is the sales price of the vehicle, the sales price of the part, the customer pay price on the service. Does that make sense? We're not talking about gross, we're talking about sales, top line number.
And what
Guys, if you're selling, when he said $600,000, so if you're selling cars in the amount of $20,000 average price, how many cars do you have to sell to generate $600,000 worth of sales? 30. So that manager, when he shows up, when he walks on those two legs of his, with his pretty smile and beautiful combed hair, and he's just a stud. He's coming in telling you, I'm the man. You hire that guy, and you're at 90 cars. You hire that human being. If you're not at 120,
you're nowhere.
You are nowhere.
Right.
Are we all clear about that? So when we say I'm a player, I'm the man, I'm all that in a bag of chips, and you're sticking your chest out for all the guys that are not dealers right here, man, you better back it up. You show up, boom, you are at 120. And from there, we broke even, right?
Yep.
Does that make sense? And a lot of people don't realize this relationship. It's huge. The smaller the net percent is of your sales, the bigger an expense cut impact is. Right, Bill?
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
I'll give you an example. Last year, I went to one of our dealers he's a great guy. He's a great sales guy. And he's a crew car guy. I mean, the guy he doesn't really know what's going on in fixed. As long as they take care of the customer, he doesn't really much care. He just wants to sell cars. We were at a meeting, and generally speaking, the relationship between gross as percentage sales and expenses as percent of sales, for most groups, runs around 12 to 16%. Sometimes a little lower, sometimes a little higher than that. And I remember I said to him, I said, I think the group average was about 14% expense to sales. He was at about 16%. And I said, if you were to get just to the group average, you would make $2 million more next year. And not have to sell another car, service another car, sell another part. I thought the poor guy was going to have a heart attack on me right there in the meeting room. He's just sitting there, you've got to be kidding me. And he's just got beside himself. Says, okay, let's have a break. And he said, I want you to go out to my store. So I went to a store twice last year. We were able to, in those 2 visits, we were able to cut, again, $100,000 in expenses out of his store. And again, cutting nobody's pay, nothing. What we got after was the way they were addressing floor plan charges in the store. They were, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't remember. It's when you depreciation. They were capitalizing, they're accelerating their depreciation. And they shouldn't have been doing that, so we changed that. And then their advertising was all out of whack. We cut that also, and some other sundry things and all that, but we cut $100,000 a month out of expenses out of that store. And again, it was by doing what Greg was talking about right here, was doing a line-by-line expense review. It's just I cannot say how important it is when you get to the position where you're a general manager or a general sales manager or whatever, and a dealer now, of course, to be doing this on a regular basis. But as a manager, you need to understand this also, because the only way you're ever going to get promoted out of where, how many of you guys want to get promoted? Okay, all right. The way you're going to get promoted is by projecting the fact that you understand what the next step is. I know it happens sometimes, but most of the time, most dunces don't get promoted. People who get promoted are people that have demonstrated they understand the next step, they understand the position, and they're ready to step into that position. And kudos to Helmy for having a sales training organization that is recognizes, rather than just doing sales with you and talking about generating gross and the sales process and closes and all that, which are all important. But it's to have the balance to talk about, okay, once we've made it, how do we keep what we've made? Because I'll guarantee you, I could make a great living, Greg could, Helmy could, if all we did was to go into stores and just try to help them keep their expenses in line.